This video is all about co-sleeping. Now, over on Instagram, I share openly and honestly about my wife and I's co-sleeping journey of almost 4 years, and when I do, I'm always inundated with questions from my followers. So I've opened up a question box, and at the end of this video I'll address some of the hundreds and hundreds of questions that were sent my way. So I think it's really important, especially for new parents, that they're provided with information about co-sleeping, because especially in the Western world where it's maybe frowned upon, we really need to ensure that we provide parents with the information to help them make decisions that are right for them and their families. How do you co-sleep safely? What are the benefits of keeping your baby within sensory range for the first year or beyond? So let's dive into a little bit of information about co-sleeping, and then I'll get to some of your questions. So before we kick off, it's really important just to clarify what I mean when I talk about co-sleeping, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions. People just assume that you have a newborn baby in your bed if you're co-sleeping, and that just isn't the case at all. So when I talk about co-sleeping, essentially what it means is having your baby or your child within sensory range. So that could be room sharing, so having your baby on a separate sleeping surface next to your bed, or it could be bed sharing. Certainly for my wife and I, our co-sleeping journey has evolved over the years based on what's been safe for our little one. So it started off with having him on a separate safe sleeping surface next to the bed, and this obviously helped us respond to him through the night, but also helped my wife breastfeed, and I'll get to that a little bit later. And as our little one grew older, he transitioned to a cot next to the bed. We then opened up the cot, so it opened up onto our bed as he got older, 18 months to 2 years, and now he sleeps with us in our bed at the age of almost 4. So the NHS in the UK and the AAP in the US are actually aligned when it comes to co-sleeping. So they agree that the safest place for your baby for the first 6 months, but ideally the first 12 months, is to have baby with you in your room on a separate sleeping surface. So there are a number of reasons why they recommend keeping baby close for that first year. So firstly, it allows them to sleep much lighter, which is much safer for younger babies. Secondly, it helps to feed them more regularly through the night, which is obviously great for their development. And of course, for mothers that choose to breastfeed, on average their breastfeeding journey will be much longer, because having baby in the same room as you will make breastfeeding much easier, especially if you're breastfeeding on demand. And of course, having baby within sensory range just allows us and provides us with that opportunity to be much more responsive through the night. So if they need changing, if they're in pain, if they need us in any way, then we're there quickly to respond. Now, when you talk about co-sleeping, a comment that crops up often is that co-sleeping is dangerous. And yes, if done incorrectly, co-sleeping can be very dangerous. And there are a number of guidelines that you can follow, and I highly recommend following the Safe Sleep 7, and I'm going to put a link to the Safe Sleep 7 in the description below. Now, there's so much information and studies out there about co-sleeping and the risks and the safety all around co-sleeping, and there are even articles I've read that recommend moving baby into their own room to sleep independently at 3 months and at 4 months, which I wholeheartedly disagree with. But I think it's really important just to provide parents with information that will allow them to make educated decisions that are best for them and their family. We shouldn't be encouraging parents to rush baby into their own room. We shouldn't be telling them not to co-sleep and not to do this and not to do that. We should be providing them with the information and allow them to make educated decisions. Now, I urge everyone to dive into the articles below, certainly to understand about the Safe Sleep 7 and steps you can take to ensure that you're co-sleeping, and if you decide to bring your younger child into your bed, that you're doing it safely. Now, just a trigger warning that the next section of the video is going to talk a little bit about SIDS, but I think it's really important to share this information, especially when creating a video about co-sleeping. Now, there is the argument that parents can follow the Safe Sleep 7, but even once you've followed the Safe Sleep 7, there is that very small percentage of risk left over. And yes, that is true, but in the same breath, if we're rushing babies to sleep independently, to sleep in their own room, then there's an inherent risk involved with that as well. So let's just dive into some of the data and take a little look. So I'm going to bring it up here, and we can see that this is a co-sleeping and SIDS guide for health professionals from 2017. Now, within 2017 in the UK, 183 babies died of SIDS which equates to 0.03% of all births. Now, around 50% of these babies were babies sleeping in a cot or Moses basket, and around 50% of these babies were babies co-sleeping, and in this scenario, co-sleeping actually means bed sharing. Now, if we look at this 50% of those that died whilst bed sharing, 90% of those babies died in hazardous situations, which were largely preventable. Now, I think that's a really important point, because if we're gonna co-sleep, if we're gonna bed share, then we must absolutely do it safely. So if we look at those numbers, obviously 90% of the 50% that died whilst co-sleeping were preventable, and this is just all stems back to what I talked about earlier around education. Obviously, if we're not talking openly and honestly about co-sleeping, if we're not talking about safe bed sharing, then we aren't providing parents with the information they need to co-sleep and bed share safely. So I hope you found that section of the video useful. Again, apologies for the trigger warning, but I think it's really important to share that information. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about my wife and I's co-sleeping journey, and I'm going to bring up and answer some of your questions that you sent over on Instagram. Okay, so I've got my phone here. I'm going to get up some of these questions and we're going to dive in. So I think the first one that needs to be addressed, because it comes up a number of times, and it's quite simply, how do you do sex? Now, this is a very valid question. Now, yes, if you co-sleep with your child, sex is impacted, but I think it's important to note that it's impacted in the bedroom. Obviously, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but all I can say is if you co-sleep with your child, then it forces you to get creative. Okay, so next question. I'll just flick through here. Did your wife breastfeed? I'm going on 4 years of co-sleeping, and as a result, our little one still wakes up to nurse. So yes, my wife did breastfeed. She breastfed for almost 3 years, and with that she breastfed on demand through the night, and I think it got to the point where our little one was sleeping through probably a couple of months before his 3rd birthday. He was sleeping through the night, maybe waking up once, but it was more for a comfort feed. So just for ease, my wife would pick him up, pop him on the boob, and literally within a minute he would just settle back, and we'd just pop him back in the open cot that was joined onto our bed. So in terms of weaning, I know a few other weaning questions came on. We tried to do it as gently as possible. It was just a natural progression. It got to the 1 night feed. So eventually it came to the point where when he asked for the boob during the night, we just diverted his attention to water. And this was very gradual. We didn't force it. It wasn't cold turkey. It was just a very gradual process until at one point he just stopped asking for the boob. And that was sort of the catalyst to him stopping breastfeeding. And I think my wife did get emotional at the time, because she said you don't actually realise or appreciate when that final breastfeed will come, because when it's a natural gradual process, obviously if you go cold turkey, I can imagine that being quite immediate, but obviously when it is a more gradual process, you know, they feed less, they ask for the boob less, then there will come that time where you realise that they aren't going to ask again. So that can be quite emotional, so just prepare yourself for that. So just get back to the questions. How do you safely leave the bedroom after they're asleep? 11-month-old currently. So this parent has an 11-month-old. When our little one was 11 months old, we would lay with him until he was asleep in the bed, and then when he fell asleep, we would pick him up and put him in his cot, which was next to the bed. So a separate sleeping surface, a nice safe sleeping surface for him. And we had 2 things then. We had a baby monitor, which had a thermometer built in so we could see the room temperature, and we also had a temperature egg that was in the background of the monitor as well that changed colour, so we could monitor the temperature, and we knew he was safe because he was on his own separate safe surface. So get back to these questions. Does your child go to bed independently, and then do you join them in bed after? So no, he doesn't go to bed independently. We lay with him. We've never decided to leave him or try to encourage him to go to sleep independently. It's just a choice for us. It works for us. We enjoy that extra time with him as he's drifting off to sleep. And then once he's asleep, we both return downstairs. Even now, at almost 4 years old, we've still got the baby monitor. I remember asking my Instagram followers about this, and there was a mixed bag of whether they still have monitors with their 4-year-old. I don't know if it wasn't on, I'd feel a little bit uneasy, so it's just something that we've chosen to do, and obviously we can just keep an eye on him. So yeah, that's that. So back to these questions. Finally, a parenting blog that isn't shaming co-sleeping. I want to read more. Thank you. I think, yeah, as I've said before, it's really important to, instead of telling parents what to do or trying to force them into decisions, just provide them with the information and allow parents to make their own decisions. I think that's really important with accounts that provide parenting information. So, obvious one, sorry if it's too personal. When, where can you get intimate? Already shared that one. Get creative. It's really important. Does Luca not want his own room? When we stopped at 3 years, our little one was over the moon that she had her own space. Luca's got his own bedroom, he's got his own bed, he's got his toys in there, he's got his own wallpaper. We ask him probably once every 2 weeks if he wants to go into his own bed. I think because at the moment it's not an issue for us, we all get a great night's sleep. We're not forcing anything. I can't be doing with the stress and the anxiety, and a lot of people I talk to that have transitioned their child into their own room say that they end up in their bed and that causes broken sleep. So at the moment he's almost 4, yes, but we all get a great night's sleep, so why change it? Right. I co-sleep, baby 2 years old, how to handle all of his moving while sleeping and you're asleep. I guess a bigger bed could work. I think around 2 years old what we had is I got a bit of DIY on the go, and I actually opened his cot and raised the base so it was flush with our bed. So he had his safe sleeping surface, but it was obviously open into the bed, and that just gives you that extra room, so you're not kicked in the face all evening. I worry about the little one rolling out now they can crawl. If you're worried, you can what's that 1 year old? You can still keep them next to the bed on a separate surface. If you're worried about that, obviously, if your bed is safe for a 1 year old, if you've got a firm mattress and pillows are out the way and duvets out the way, obviously if you place them in the middle of the bed and you've got a monitor, then obviously you can keep an eye on them. But yeah, you need to obviously work with what you've got. Just scrolling through. Why did you decide it's right for your family? What's the biggest challenge? So I think it's just been a natural progression. Obviously, the safest place, as I've mentioned, for your new baby for that first year is within sensory range. My wife was breastfeeding at the time, so it was just a natural evolution. And I think because we've both been on board with it and it's worked for us, I'm not saying in any way it would work for you and your family, but because it's worked for us, we've just kept rolling with it. I mean, because we all get a great night's sleep and everyone's happy, there's no reason to really change it at the moment. So, question from Nick, why? Again, because it works for us. We do this too, almost 3 years old now. Are you stopping? Not at the moment. That's not to say in 2-3 months. Again, we'll keep asking the question, as I've mentioned before, would he like to go in his own room? And we've been told by many people that at some point they will just say, yes, let's rock and roll in our own room. But at the moment, it's working. Are you and your wife able to get quality sleep? Yes, and I don't want to sound like I'm wearing some sort of badge of honour. It just works for us, and I guarantee probably that we get better sleep now because it's consistent, uninterrupted sleep. Once our little one falls asleep, he's then sleeping right through to the morning. He might wake up a little bit in the night and just want to come over and snuggle in, but it's not ever a huge event when he wakes up. It's just a little stir, snuggles in, then back to bed. Oh, this is an interesting one. Have you ever received pushback from a paediatrician? How did you handle it? Medical professionals recommend room sharing for the first year, and I think thereafter, as long as I know some people feel from 18 months to 2 years is the optimal age to bring them into the bed. The fact is that some parents will bring their babies into the bed earlier, but as long as you're co-sleeping safely, then and you're talking openly and honestly with a paediatrician about the measures you're taking to co-sleep safely, then I don't see any issue, and we've had no issue either. This is a good one. How do you make sure your little one doesn't wake up when you go to bed? Now, I don't want to look through it through rose-tinted glasses, because I'm sure there are times over the last 4 years when we've gone to bed and he's woken up, but I kid you not, once he's asleep, so we've got an ensuite next to our bedroom, as soon as he's asleep of an evening, I'll just jump in the shower. I'll have a full-on shower, we'll go downstairs, we'll come up, we'll brush our teeth with our electric toothbrushes, obviously not over the bed so it's super loud for him, but you know, within the vicinity, and I'm not sure, he just doesn't wake up. I think maybe because it's what we've always done. I'm not sure, but no, he rarely wakes up now once he's asleep. Obviously over the years, night wakings were definitely a thing, and obviously we've had our difficult periods of intense night wakings, like every, I don't know, seemingly 45 minutes to breastfeed. Certainly when he was between 18 months and 2 years, that was quite an intense phase. But no, at the moment, I'm not saying it might change, you know, our little ones change quite often, but at the moment, once he's asleep, he sleeps right through. Thanks to everyone for making it this far. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's not often just a regular dad talks openly and honestly about his or his family's co-sleeping journey, so I hope you've enjoyed it. Hit like, hit subscribe, and as ever, I'll be back next week with another parenting video. Cheers.